All right, joining me now on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Cenk Uygur. Cenk is, of course, the host of the Young Turks, which you can find at theyoungturks.com. He's also the host of MSNBC's The Cenk Uygur Show. Cenk, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
You're someone who built his own online network up from nothing. You built an online empire, man. And then you made a transition into a national TV show. And what I really want to ask you about is this. What do you think about the current state of the liberal media today? And obviously, when I say liberal media, I don't mean what idiot right-wingers mean. What I mean is liberals, we have some voices on national TV like you, Rachel Maddow, Ed Schultz. Do you think that we're finally making a dent in the national narrative?
I think that we are actually, and I'm a little surprised to say that.
Yeah.
In the past, it was so hard because we had almost no voice. Well, until Keith Olbermann made the turn to those special comments, we literally had no voices on television. And it was hard, getting any of our points across. Now we've got some, decent amount of traction, We've got, Rachel's doing a great job, Ed is, Lawrence, me, et cetera, et cetera. I think Dylan Radigan's on the right side in terms of holding the government accountable. And, sometimes I'll see things that we say on air that'll start to get traction in Washington, right? The Washington media that I've been complaining about forever. But, I guess that's why they call it mainstream television, right? And so it affects the mainstream.
Right.
And, that's a long way from where we were. And it is an amazing concept because the reality is online, the Young Turks have a larger audience than I do on television.
Right.
But sometimes it's also who the audience is. And in television, right or wrong, the influential people seem to watch it.
Yeah, they haven't quite gotten that those people that are watching are people, and actually probably they're even more important because they're actually seeking you out. You generally, I mean, there are some viral videos, but if someone who's like your regular audience, they found you and they stuck with you.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I'm not sure that advertisers and the entire media infrastructure understands the value of that yet. If you do well on television, like, for example, I'm doing pretty well right now, but that's because I have a good lead-in from Hardball. That's because Ed left me a good audience. That's because MSNBC is a solid channel. Now, I hope to build upon that, and it appears that I am, which is good. I feel great about it, et cetera, et cetera. But online, it's so much harder because you have to build it from scratch. And you have to draw on that audience and keep them. And when you do, they're not there because you were on the right channel or that you had the right lead-in. There was no lead-in. There was no channel. They were there for you, which is great, And every good thing we've ever gotten, we've gotten because of our online audience.
Right. So how have you found, obviously doing a show on MSNBC is definitely different than than an online show where you have complete creative control. I mean, I watch your show on MSNBC and you do a great job and it's still clearly you. But how have you found that? Have you found it difficult to make that kind of transition to where you kind of have to be a little more, I guess, what's a little more, at least on, you have X amount of time to get to what you have to get to, I guess.
Right. Yeah, there's a number of issues in being on television that feels a little less natural, if you will. One is that you're scripted, right? Now, in my case, I write the script, but still it's a script you're reading, right, off the prompter.
Right.
And that just feels a little less conversational than what I do on the Young Turks, which is just simply tell those stories. Now, I can do that from memory on the Young Turks. If I asked to do it from memory on TV, they'd say, I don't know about that. So that's part of it. And then another part of it is the time constraint. You're right. I mean, like on the Young Turks, if I were having an interesting conversation, I don't really view it as an interview as much as I view it as a conversation with a guest. And we'll easily go 15, 20 minutes. Whereas on television, you've got a very tight window, like about 2.5 to 5 minutes maximum for an interview. And so there's only so much you can squeeze in, only so much you can do in follow-ups. So there's a great number of constraints. It obviously has an upside and it has a downside.
Yeah. Let's make a transition here. So right now, to kind of what I see is kind of what should be the fight of 2012 here. So we have Republicans in the right wing. They're waging a full-out assault on the middle class on both a national level and in my ways, I kind of look at it even more importantly on a state-by-state level. And yet, we have, generally speaking, the majority of national Democrats, including President Obama, sadly, they either don't seem to get it or they just don't seem to care. Do you have any idea? How do we actually change that?
Yeah, well, first of all, the attacks by the Republicans are both incredibly dangerous, but at the same time, foolhardy on their part as well. Right. So they're dangerous if you let it take hold. They change the entire dynamic of our government and our political structure as well. The reason they might change our political structure is if the union money does stop going to the Democrats, you'll have a massive imbalance because so much of the corporate money is going to Republicans. Now, I'm not that big a fan of the Democratic Party, as anybody who watches the show knows.
Right. Neither am I. So yeah.
Right, but I'm less of a fan of the Republican Party, that's for sure.
Because we know that one's obviously going to do horrible things. The other one's just going to let horrible things happen. So.
Yeah, and it's just the people that let the horrible things happen, it makes you feel a little sicker inside. But anyway, we know what we're getting with the Republicans. It's totally bought corporate robots, right? Yeah. And if you let those robots take over, it's not a good thing for the country. It's, in fact, of course, I think a disastrous thing, and I think it'll crash the economy, et cetera, as they've done before.
Right.
So, but the fact that they have exposed themselves a little bit, though, is a good thing because now, I talk to union people on the MSNBC show all the time, and you see it in the polls, and you see it in the anecdotes, you see it everywhere, where people are saying, like a head of a cop union came on the other night on MSNBC and said, look, I didn't know this was what we were getting. If I had known this, I wouldn't have been on board for it at all. It turns out they're going after the middle class.
Right.
On the one hand, I wanted to say, duh. Like, winning, duh. No, losing, duh. Anyway, but on the other hand, I mean, look, that's the part and parcel of the problem for Democrats across the country. A lot of people didn't get that. Now they're beginning to get that, and they're not that happy about it. We'll see how the voters respond in Wisconsin and Ohio, et cetera, with the recalls, the referendums. There's a Supreme Court battle in Wisconsin tomorrow, actually. That's going to be an important election. Now, as far as the national Democratic response, I think, which was closer to your question in the beginning, it's been disastrous. It's been nearly non-existent.
Right.
The Republicans have handed them this incredible political gift, and they don't know what to do with it. They're bumbling, fumbling. Or worse yet, they just leave it in the corner and don't pay any attention to it because the President Obama and the Senate Democrats, of course not all of them, but in large part, cannot get their head out of Washington. They're stuck in that Washington bubble. They think the only thing that matters is pleasing the Washington media, and the Washington media is obsessed, centrist, which is, of course, just a code word, unfortunately, in this day and age for corporatists, whoever can give the bigger tax cuts to the rich and the corporations, et cetera. And, he gets this unbelievable gift in that all the union members are now turning back and going, I should be with the Democratic Party. And Barack Obama does not pick up his comfortable pair of shoes and join them. Instead, he just leaves them to drift.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I mean, again, it's like the Republicans, they could not have given the election just like what the election should be about better than they have, but again, then you're just scratching your head. It's like, why are you pouncing this? Like the talk about now that the fact that Republicans are the budget thing coming up. Republicans are trying to get rid of Medicare. How can you not just pounce on this stuff?
Well, that's going to be a really interesting test case, right?
Yeah.
So Obviously, Paul Ryan is good. Tomorrow is going to put forward, the $4 trillion spending cuts and tax cuts, which they're going to take the top rate down from 35% to 25%. And now that presents an opportunity for President Obama to go, hell no, not on my watch. Okay, and I mean they've been attacking Medicare.
Do you think he knows those words? I'm not sure I've ever heard him say anything near that. But it is the opportunity.
I'm not sure I've ever heard him say no, let alone hell no.
Right.
But you know what? No. To be fair to President Obama, sometimes he's very tough on liberals.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when Senator Dorgan tried to, introduce the amendment to import drugs from outside the country, so that the average working guy can catch a break and get drugs for a little less money, President Obama came down on him like a ton of bricks.
Right.
And he said, no, I made a deal with the drug companies. They have to have their monopoly. He turned a whole bunch of Democrats against it, and that amendment lost. So he can be tough. He just hasn't chosen to be with Republicans at all for whatever reason. I guess they think it's good politics. I think it's totally de-energizes your base. And, there was a recent poll on young voters, and they're like, they're not going to come out to vote. And, of course, Washington is stunned by that. Well, in their mind, they had already put young voters in Barack Obama's camp. And then that's how they'll always act. But it's not that the young voters are all of a sudden becoming Republicans. It's that they got the solution because they were promised change, real change, wait, we're going to change the way Washington works. This is a mini little revolt against the power establishment that's sucking us dry, et cetera, et cetera. And then what did Obama do with it?
Yeah.
So how could they not be disillusioned?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, but final thing on that, sorry, to come back to your original question. Look, any day the president can turn it around. And so he can come out and say, we're going to fight on Medicare. We're going to fight on Medicaid. We're not going to give in to these guys. And then then the Obama supporters will be ecstatic because I'll shut up. In fact, I'll give credit to the president. I do it based on the facts.
Yeah.
If he does that, I'll give him all the credit in the world, right?
Sure.
But you've seen the pattern, and unfortunately, up until now, the pattern has not been good.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. I know you got to go pretty soon, so I'm gonna one quick more question and then I'll let you go. So obviously Obama's announced surprisingly that he's running for re-election. We're all shocked about that. So I have a lot of my liberal friends seem to take it as a foregone conclusion that he's going to win. I couldn't disagree more. But what are your thoughts on Obama's chances? Obviously the Republicans are nuts and they're all crazy. But what are your thoughts on his chances of re-election today?
I'm really surprised to hear that people are that convinced of it. I think it's, I'd put it at 52-48 in his favor, and I'll tell you why.
Right.
He has a number of things going for him. First is demographics. The country is becoming significantly more minority, and voters, like black voters, already vote beyond their percentage of the population, but Latinos have a lot of catching up to do. But there's a huge swing in the Latino population, obviously, in the last 10 years, and they are voting more Democratic. In fact, Obama in 2008 got 80% of the minority vote, and I don't suspect that that'll change that much. It's a matter of how many of them will vote. That's the important part, right?
Right.
But he has that huge advantage. So, for example, let me just give you a quick example of it. You know that in Georgia of all places, he only needs to win 25% of the white vote to carry the state, which is a shocking number because Georgia's become much more minority in the last 10 years. So that's an advantage for him. The other advantage for him is that he will likely be running against a lunatic, and that's a significant advantage. And that's because the primaries produce that kind of person from the Republican side, let alone the fact that those are the only people running. So, he's got these ready-made advantages that it seems hard to lose. But I just fundamentally don't believe in his politics. I don't mean it policy-wise. Policy-wise, I'm often quite disappointed with what he does, but, when he does the right things, I give him credit and better than Republicans, yada, yada, yada. Will I vote for him? Of course I will, That's not an issue. Now, if he had a primary opponent, that might be different, but he doesn't, and against a Republican, it's the biggest no-brainer of all time. His main thing is, can he get not the people like us to vote and not our viewers and listeners to vote, that those people are interested in politics already. They're going to vote, and they're going to vote for him, right?
Precisely, yeah.
Is, can they get those disinterested people to vote, and can they convince the electorate, hey, my case is right? And I think that's a really hard thing for President Obama to do, since he hasn't made his case in the last 2.5 years.
Right.
So all of a sudden he's got to turn around and start saying the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong, and I haven't heard that at all. So does he have it in him? Can he turn it around in enough time? Well, with the colossal political advantages that he has, and he'll be able to raise about $1 billion, so that's another huge advantage.
Right.
I say he probably will pull it out, but by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah. What the thing was, I actually never, I was less worried about it until the Republicans did what they did in Wisconsin and Ohio and Indiana. When that happened, Wisconsin, they elected Walker, they got rid of Feingold. I thought Wisconsin was switching. Now there's a chance Walker gets recalled. Perhaps, they're going to recall a bunch of the state senators. I think Obama takes Wisconsin now in a walk. But up until that point, I actually was like, I think they may have given Obama the election, again, with their overreaching in the individual states.
You know what, Matt, you're 100% right. I mean, I wrote a list of, just yesterday, of the reasons why I think Obama's probably going to pull out the election. And I forgot to mention the one you just said. That was reason number 2. The unions coming back into the Democratic fold, the cops, the firefighters, et cetera, those blue-collar workers realizing it's us versus them. That's a huge advantage for Obama if he can figure out a way to take advantage of it and stop trying to please, Mark Halpern.
Yeah. Cenk Uygur from MSNBC and the Young Turks, thanks so much for joining me.
Fine. I really appreciate it, Matt. It was a great conversation.
All right. Talk to you later.